Well, happy Friday, cultural Confederates. So, seeing that there's been a lot of backlash over what's going on in Minnesota, and a lot of reference to the Confederacy, I thought we'd do a special edition of our Oddly Friday News episode, our Confederate edition. So, I'm going to go through all of these stories here where they're talking about removing these Confederate monuments, what have you. And then I've got the creme de la creme at the end from good old Senator Seth Magaziner from Rhode Island, talking about the Trump administration, this is over at Forbes, wanting to reinstate these Confederate monuments. So let's get to this. It's a one-take video. It is what it is today. That's how I usually do the videos. A lot of times I'm pressed for time. But if you're new to the channel, no fancy graphics, nothing like that. What you see is what you get. Now, if you think that me doing this is somehow, glorifying the Confederacy here, that's not the case. Yes, I was born and raised in the South. But I can use logic and reason to figure things out. I can research things. And we don't need to go into what the South was arguing about back in 1860, 1861. That's been rehashed I don't know how many times. But I want to talk about this because it just seems like every time there's a problem in this thing called the United States, the first thing people do is blame the Confederacy. Well, the Confederacy died out, 160 years ago, 165 years ago? But did you know that this week, and there's a story about this here, February 4th, marks, I think, 165 years since the formation of the Confederacy. Officially formed on February 4th, 1861. And they had their own constitution, if you didn't know that the Confederacy had their own constitution. But seeing what's going on, as I said, in Minnesota, and with these ICE agents, Border Patrol agents, including one being the head of ICE, was named Greg Bovino, being compared to, well, I'll get into that article in a little bit. So let's just get to this. Again, thank you for being with me, and thank you for watching and subscribing. As I said, it's just you, me, my smartphone, the news of the day. So a lot to get to. As I said, we'll save the creme de la creme for last. It's an audio soundbite. It's about 3 minutes long. So first, this is at Virginia Mercury. Bill, if successful, would remove Confederate monuments from Virginia's Capitol Square. Now, this came out February 5th. Pardon me, it says here, a bill by outgoing Senator Adam Eben, Democrat from Alexandria, would remove Confederate monuments from Virginia's Capitol Square, advanced in the state legislature Wednesday. This bill. The statues depict General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Governor William Extra Billy Smith, and Dr. Hunter Holmes McGuire. They're erected in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So a lot of these statues didn't even go up until post-Civil War. Now, one of the reasons for that is you can make the argument, well, they were trying to relive the glory days of the Civil War in the South. But one of the reasons for that is because at the time, and there's a book out there about this, talking about the monument race, you had this competition between Europe and America in the late 1800s with all these monuments, statues, buildings going up to celebrate, this country or that country's culture. And you had a lot of nations being formed, or this idea of nationhood that people were identifying with at that time. But it goes on to say, when laws disenfranchising Black Americans were enacted and memorials to the Confederacy were surfacing in public spaces like courthouses and other municipal buildings. Well, I hate to break the news to the author of this article here, but they had segregated the schools in Massachusetts in the 1840s. In fact, the term Jim Crow refers to a rail car going back, I believe, to the 1830s, when you first had rail lines, or the railroads. So that's over at the Virginia Mercury. As I said, this is over at Channel 5, Live 5 WCSC. This came out on February 4th. Montgomery, Alabama. Delegates from South Carolina and 6 other states gathered in Montgomery, Alabama to create the Confederate States of America on this date 165 years ago, so I was right. Mississippi Senator, he was a senator at the time, Jefferson Davis, was elected as its provincial president. From there, Confederate militia forces started seizing United States forts and property throughout the South. Their actions came to a head in April with the Battle of Fort Sumter, which was the opening conflict of the Civil War. I don't think you'd really call that a battle. It was more of a scuffle, really, an attack. Have you ever looked at a picture of Fort Sumter? It's actually quite small. I mean, it was, pretty advanced for its time, but in the grand scale of things, if you look at buildings now, it was pretty small and pretty well isolated, far out in the harbor there. And there was a conflict at the time of who actually owned that fort. And Lincoln was told not to send, by his cabinet now, was told not to send fortifications down there or resupply this fort, what have you. Or provisions, rather, to send these provisions down there. It was warned by his cabinet not to do that because then it would, it would cause conflict with the South. Or it could cause the Civil War. And we also have this going on in Maryland. This is over at Fox 5 News. Wes Moore calls Maryland's flag a contradiction, sparks backlash, then backtracks. Now, this came out actually today, February 6th. This is in Indianapolis. Maryland Governor Wes Moore moved Thursday night to tamp down backlash over remarks calling the state's flag a contradiction, that's in quotes, responding on social media after a spotlight on Maryland pressed his office to, I'm reading some of this cold to you, as I normally do, his office to clarify whether he believes the flag's Confederate and Union symbolism call for change. While discussing his effort to engage Maryland in a national mid-decade congressional redistricting battle, a lot to say there, Moore brought up the state flag and its history during a podcast last week. Quote, and I do understand kind of the history of this country, with a question mark. Absolutely, like you can't look at the history of Maryland, Moore said. I mean, literally, you look at our flag. Our flag is a contradiction because our flag is literally a Confederate symbol mixed with a Union symbol. Now, he is right about that. I went and I researched this. So this is what it says about the Maryland state flag. My dad is from Baltimore. So I have roots in Virginia, Maryland, Kentucky. I have family out in California. So I'm all over the place. And I'm by my lonesome self here in the middle of the country. Or this thing called the United States. We're not really a country. We're really a federal republic. But you know what I mean. So if you actually go to the history of the flag, this goes back actually to the 1600s, well before the Confederacy, well before the Civil War, well before the formation of this thing called the United States. And this refers to the Baron of Baltimore, George Calvert. It says here, because George Calvert's mother was a heretic heiress, he was entitled to use her Crossland family coat of arms in his own arms. Now, he had his arms, you can see it on the flag here, and they merged these two into the coat of arms for the second Baron of Baltimore coat of arms. And this refers to a battle out of fortification with a vertical bar symbolizing the palisade. So nothing to do with white supremacy here, nothing to do with slavery. So that's what that was about. And during the Civil War, it goes on to say here, in the war, both Union and Confederate armies had Maryland contingents with distinctive unit badges. Remember, Maryland was one of the border states. It's actually still considered a southern state. We consider ourselves Southerners, but known as the Upper South. Union troops favored the yellow and black Calvert arms, while the Confederate units became associated with the Crossland banner, and now the Lord Baltimore banner, this first coat of arms, this had, or it has the vertical line, and it has some horizontal lines, black, gold, and then the Crossland banner has these alternating squares of white and red with a cross in the middle of it, middle of the symbol here. When the present flag made its first appearance in 1876, it included both. This may have been a last-minute compromise, or, as the modern Maryland Secretary of State suggests, a representation of the reunion of all the state citizens 11 years after the war ended. So this flag is actually a flag of unity, not a flag of division, because they decided to include both of these, seeing that you had both of these symbols from these coat of arms, because you had Maryland as a border state that had both Union and Confederate soldiers or units. See, the thing is, people don't even know their own history, but they want to make this big controversy over the Maryland state flag. I mean, but if you want to change the flag, I'm all for that. Vote on it. Have the people go and vote on whether or not they want to change the Maryland state flag. I mean, hell, everybody else is doing it. If they're doing it, I got to do it. I got to be cool. I got to be chic. So this is over at The Guardian, in our keeping in line here with our Bash the Confederacy Day. Maybe you should have a national Bash the Confederacy Day. What do you say? Bovino portrayed as Confederate general in 2018 email exchange. Greg Bovino allegedly denied promoting 2 Border Patrol officials because of their race, according to several reports. The recently demoted Border Patrol officer Gregory Bovino, who served as the face of the Trump administration's immigration crackdown in several U.S. cities, was compared to a Confederate general in an email sent to him by a colleague in 2018. So he himself didn't compare himself to a Confederate general or to the Confederacy, but one of his colleagues did, sending him this email, comparing him to a Confederate general or somebody in the Confederacy. A Border Patrol agent who was later promoted to a senior role in New Orleans sent the email in question, as well as a number of Confederacy-related images, after Bovino canceled a job listing and installed that same agent, a white officer. Ooh, they had to put that in there, had to make a dig. He was a white officer in the listed role by bypassing the agency's standard career advancement process. Now, could it be, and I'm just throwing this out there, regarding the potential officers who weren't chosen, could it be that maybe they just weren't qualified because they didn't have the proper qualifications for the job? That could be a possibility. I'm just throwing that out there. So finally, let's go to the creme de la creme here. Again, this is Senator Seth Magaziner from Rhode Island, talking about men who committed treason. Pardon me again. Men who committed treason. These Confederates. These insurrectionists. This is over at right here on YouTube at Forbes. So I'm going to play you the audio, and I'll analyze this as we go to finish out the video today. Magaziner tears into Trump administration over these Confederate or planned Confederate statues, or these statues that are going to be reinstated. Here we go, folks. This is your government hard at work. This is what they're debating about in Congress, not about lowering the cost of food, not about keeping the border secure, but talking here about these Confederate monuments that Trump is planning to put up. Let's go.
I thank my friend and colleague, Representative Stansberry, for bringing us together
tonight. Let me turn up the volume here.
To discuss an important and alarming situation. Every American should be outraged at the Trump administration's attempt to erase
you should be outraged.
American history.
You better be outraged.
And specifically, to erase the history of Black and Native American and Hispanic.
To erase the history of Black, Native Americans,
people of color who have
Hispanic, and other people of color.
The Department of the Interior,
well, we're a
under
federal
this
republic,
administration,
but
recently removed a slavery-related exhibit at Independent National Historical Park in Philadelphia, recognizing people enslaved by the founders.
What about context here? Why was that removed? Could it be that maybe that went beyond just mentioning, okay, you know, this is what happened with slavery, or this was the incident that was involved? Possibly.
They removed a sign from Wyoming's Grand Teton National Park mentioning Native
By the way,
Americans.
if you don't know why they call the Grand Tetons the Grand Tetons, we'll just leave that at that. Maybe we should go and just get rid of the... Let's go and just topple the Grand Teton Mountains. Because there's a reference there I'm not going to mention on the show. I try to keep this family show, family-oriented.
American massacres.
Native American
They have
massacres.
moved a sign at
Yes, those
Bent's
happened.
Old Fort National Historic Site in Colorado, describing the forced removal of a native tribe and a family's slave ownership. Why? Why are they doing this? Well, when people try to erase history, they are often doing it because they want to shape the future.
Oh, okay. So here he is talking about the Trump administration taking down whatever it is in Wyoming, in Colorado, you name the state, Grand Teton, this whatever it is over at the Grand Teton Mountains. Okay. But the Democrats in 2020 were toppling all these Confederate statues because of the death of George Floyd, and he's going to stand here on the House of Representatives floor here and talk about people erasing history. Okay, you go, Seth Magaziner.
They want to shape a future in which America does not honor the full diversity that has made our country the beacon of light that it is in the world. They do not want people to know about the struggle that went into building this more perfect union. They want to build a future that looks more like the past. And we cannot allow that to happen. Well,
isn't that the point of monuments, to remember the past, whether it's good or bad? I mean, should we take down everything that's ever been put up throughout history? Should we take down the pyramids in Egypt? Should we get rid of the White House? I mean, seriously, these people are talking out both sides of their mouth here.
Insidious plot.
We're almost done, I promise you, folks. Just hang in there.
History goes far beyond the national parks and the Department of the Interior.
Goes far beyond these national parks, Parks of the Interior, Department of the Interior, right?
To limit the use of or avoid using 200 words, including tribal, Native American, immigrants, racial, black, and women.
Now, wait a minute. Whoa, wait a minute. Haven't you been has this party not been the party? Now, I'm an independent voter here, but have not the Democrats talked about how there are 50 different genders and that we should embrace transgenderism and all this other crap? I mean, come on.
But they're not trying to erase all of our history. In fact, they have restored a Confederate statue of
Robert God!
in Washington, D.C., and ordered a portrait of Robert E. Lee to be placed
in the Pentagon. God!
Men who committed treason against this country. And
whoa, back it up there. Whoa. Slow down there, Seth Magaziner. Got to stop you there for a moment. The states in the South seceded from the Union, and this Union still existed, just with less states. If a state or a territory or a region secedes, they are not creating treason because they have declared their independence through this thing called secession, which happens through a state convention or meeting of the state legislature. If this guy doesn't know that, he should not be a representative for the state of Rhode Island.
Slavery.
This
administration has continued to allow its own employees to post white supremacist language on social media. A 25-year-old
white supremacist language.
Wrote,
what language is that? You see, he's throwing all these accusations out there, and he's not giving one example here. Not one example.
You could not pay me to marry outside my ethnicity and normalize Indian hate. This came to light a year ago. He's still employed by the administration. Another, the assistant chief counsel for ICE, had a social media account. America is a white nation. Migrants are all criminals. Still employed. This is not okay. We must fight back. I thank my colleague for bringing attention to this matter, and I yield.
And we yield too. But we're not going to yield to your stupidity, that's for sure. So that is your Oddly Friday News episode, a special edition, our Confederate edition. Bash the Confederacy Day. Obviously, that's what people are doing. It's been Bash the Confederacy Week. Hell, it's been Bash the Confederacy since the end of the Civil War, since 1865. What the hell is wrong with these people? Get with the times, brother. Stop wallowing in the past. We're not trying to wallow in the past. But you can't be taking down statues all the time and then turn around and say, oh, well, people are trying to erase our history. What the hell are you doing, hypocrite? So tell me what you think in the comments section below. Hope you enjoyed the video. Follow me at Instagram, Jason197711. You can find me at Substack or go to Culture Confederacy at CultureConfed1 on X. This is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out. Stay safe, everybody. Keep up the culture, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.